Smithing. नहीं पता प्लीज मुझे कुछ मत बोलो थोड़ा सा साइड में क्लियर है तो मेरे को भी दिखाना आई डोंट वांट द मेरा आपका पास मेकअप में ज़्यादा लग रहा है बट वो ज़्यादा नहीं लग रहा है यूट्यूब पे तो ज़्यादा नहीं लगेगा पता है किसका मेकअप मेरा आपका इट्स नॉट लुकिंग ज़्यादा क्योंकि इससे ज़्यादा नो इट विल लुक बिकॉज ही इज सीइंग फ्रॉम स्विचर का पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू ही इज नॉट सीइंग यूट्यूब फॉर हाँ ही इज सीइंग इट फ्रॉम स्विचर पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू नॉट फ्रॉम यूट्यूब ओके
by Jindal Stainless Limited, Tata Steel, Volvo India, South Indian Bank, Coca-Cola, and media partner, the New Indian Express. The theme of the conference for this year is Social Media, the Changing Communication Environment. We all know that the proliferation of social media has filled the world with a flood of undifferentiated news and information that has transformed the audience from passive consumers to proactive consumers who decide what they want, when they want, and how they want it.
Unprecedented opportunity for marginalized people to speak collective outrage without reflection.
We now request Professor Dr. Father Paul Fernandez, Vice Chancellor of Xavier University, Bhubaneswar, to please come up on the stage. I call upon Jennifer, our first year student, to present the bouquet to Father. Thank you, Jennifer.
We now request Father Augustine, Registrar, Xavier University, and Father Ludraj to please come up on the stage. I now request Ananya and Jennifer to please present the bouquet to Father Augustine and Father Ludraj. Thank you, Jennifer and Ananya.
We have with us Mr. Ariel Sibelino, who is also our keynote speaker. Mr. Ariel is the Executive Director and Trustee of Philippine Press Institute. He was president of the Philippine Communication Society. Please join us in welcoming Mr. Ariel Sabellino onto the stage. May I now request Sri Radha to please come up on the stage and present the bouquet.
Now we call upon Dr. Sharon Wilson from Malaysia. She's an assistant professor at the Department of Mass Communication at University Tunku Abdul Rahman. Please join us in welcoming Dr. Sharon onto the stage. I now request Pracheta to please present the bouquet to Dr. Sharon. Thank you, Pracheta. We now request our Vice Chancellor, Father Paul, Dr. Sharon, Mr. Ariel, Father Augustine, and Father Ludraj to inaugurate the conference by lighting the lamp.
Hello, hello. Hello. Asatoma satgamaya tamasoma jyotirgamaya mrityurma mrutanti shantihi om shanti shantihi.
Thank you, all the dignitaries.
May we now request Father Ludraj, Dean of Xavier School of Communications, to welcome the gathering and deliberate on the dynamics of this year's conference.
Respected Vice Chancellor Father Paul Fernandez, Registrar Father Augustine, Mr. Ariel Sabellino, the keynote speaker from the Philippines, and Dr. Sharon Wilson, our guest speaker from Malaysia. It gives immense pleasure to welcome you all for the third international conference here at Xavier University, BHUBANESWAR, on this newly built mini auditorium. I welcome the Jesuit community, the members of the Strategic Academic Advisory Body of Xavier School of Communications, the deans of various schools, the faculty and staff of XCOMM, and other schools of the university, all the paper presenters who have worked hard to come here. My students, my dear students from Ravenshaw University, Berhampur University, Nakshatra Institute of Media Studies, the leadership team of Sisters of the Holy Cross, and the ever-trying dear students of XCOMM. Marshall McLuhan observed that older media often become the content of newer media. Sonia Livingston and Leah A. Lero said, "Today this has become an ongoing process of remediation in which older media are appropriated, refashioned, or absorbed by the new, therefore simultaneously shaping the new and reshaping the familiar." The advent of internet and social media, of course, the technology that people use for research. The researchers are trying to grapple with this new phenomenon with the old research tools in some case. However, some researchers argue that the new phenomenon needs new tools to analyze and study. So the field is vast and challenging, and that is why we have this conference titled Social Media, the Changing Communication Environment. New media technologies are here to stay. They have become our companions in our day-to-day functioning. In the next 2 days, we would be discussing about the broad sub-themes of the conference, namely issues and concerns in social media and communication sector, social media and learning, social media and business, social media and media sector, social media and society, technology and its challenges, philosophies, theories, and trends in social media. 46 research papers would be presented in the next 2 days, covering 9 sessions. This is a rare opportunity given to all of us. This is possible because the university values research and it supports it with its resources. I thank Dr. Paul Fernandez, SJ, our beloved Vice Chancellor, for inspiring us and pushing us to do more, Magis, which is our mission, and supporting us with his kind words and smile. I thank Tata Steel, the South Indian Bank, Volvo India, Jindal Steel, Travagent Tours and Travels, and our media partner, the New Indian Express. And in a special way, Bijay Mishra and his cameraman, DD News, for associating with the Xavier University in this academic pursuit. I thank Dr. Navirak, the convener of the conference, and Dr. Jolly for doing the preliminary conference work and their meticulous planning of the schedule. I thank every student and faculty who in one way or the other was helpful in organizing the 3rd International Conference. I wish every researcher and student all the very best. Enjoy your presence at Xavier University, Bhubaneswar. Thank you.
Thank you, Father. May we now request Father Paul, Vice Chancellor of Xavier University, Bhubaneswar, to please address the conference.
A very good morning to all of you and a cordial welcome to Xavier University, to our distinguished speakers today, to the Strategic Academic Advisory Board, and to all my students, and especially to researchers and speakers. We at the university should have woken up some 10 years ago. I know the messages today. Join us on the famous message that you'll get always. Join us on Facebook. All right? Follow us on Twitter. Watch us on YouTube. Okay? So these are our, so everybody is in a way in social media, whether you like it or not today. Okay? And this is the beginning of the 3rd millennium. And we have a new tool, new technology, which is just sort of gave us this new tool to link, to connect with people around the world. Do you know which is the 3rd largest country, if I may use the word country? 3rd largest country in the world today, after India, after China and India, is Facebook. It has more than 1 billion members. All right. So you're not talking about something small, or something that we think just as something of a communication tool. We are thinking of much more when we talk of social media. I leave it to the speakers and to the researchers to discover what that more is. Why did India did not wake up? It woke up today and not some 10, 15 years ago. It's something that we have to ask. Because behind the social media, there's been, at the turn of the century, discussion on whose millennium, the third millennium, would be. Whether it would be of China, India, Europe, US, or whose will it be. And we can more or less say maybe it's going to be the millennium of the social media. Okay? And the indicators are there. Facebook is only one. There are several others, about 50 odd social media platforms that connect us in various ways. So there's a lot to think about, discuss, deliberate. But there are also the other side that social media sort of, while it gives us breaking news instantly, okay, you can, earlier we had to wait for the newspaper, and if you wanted to have a morning cup of coffee and catch up on the news, so you had to wait till the newspaper came, and or you had to go to the library and things like that. And today, the breaking news happens instantly. You don't have to wait, but you still have to make your coffee. Get up and make your coffee, which lets me know that while there are also the good side to it, there are also the other side which you need to debate. Your privacy is at stake. So what do we do about it? Or the governments can track you wherever you are. They can block entries. So there are other issues that will sort of surface and have surfaced, and they can track you anywhere, and they can block you. They can do whatever. Great power is placed through social media in the hands of not only you, so also on the governments and also on institutions and organizations. They have all the information on you. They can profile you, okay, and so on. So there is the other frightening side, the dark side of the internet, we shouldn't forget about. And then you have, while these are tools that help us move forward in information, in entertainment, in breaking news, in sharing what we want to share, there also, this is not what I call a living flame yet. Okay? We look for what is the living flame, that which enlightens us, that which empowers us, that which gives us more freedom. And when it becomes something of that kind, I think there will be greater space for social media in our lives. Thank you very much. All the best to you. Enjoy your stay and good conversations here at the Xavier University.
Thank you, Father.
Our keynote speaker for the conference is Mr. Ariel Sibelino, Executive Director and Trustee, Philippine Press Institute, and former President of the Philippine Communication Society for 4 years. As the youngest Executive Director in the history of PPI, the oldest professional media organization in the country, he consolidates media-related activities, crafts and conceptualizes programs, and writes news articles and stories that are distributed to 70 national and provincial PPI newspapers throughout the country.
He has co-authored the Journalist Handbook on Avian Influenza, Media and Bird Flu as an offshoot of the PPI training program of the same title in UNICEF. May we now request Mr. Ariel to please deliver the inaugural address.
Hi, everyone. Without the microphone yet. I would have wanted to have a mobile mic because it tends to move around. sometimes people back in the Philippines would say, oh, you don't need, with your booming voice, you don't exactly need a microphone. But the thing about going around is something else. What is, oh, wow, from a little formality out there. While they're doing that. You know, in the Philippines, men do not get bouquets. It was lovely to get once in my lifetime. Yeah.
Hello. Check, check.
You see, otherwise, I would only get a bouquet if I were to compete in an Olympics. If I win or won, right? So the thing about having an inaugural address is quite daunting for me. And a keynote speech is supposed to have like notes, keys in a specific environment. And that it gives me some chill because it's supposed to be shorter because it's keynote speech, right? But I'm just gonna go back to the podium. You see how I tend to move around. And you just like drive your eyes somewhere else and it's going to be me at the back of the auditorium. And then you just hear my voice and then you don't see me. That's crazy. Okay. Is it there, Father? Okay. I just tried to, you know, I wanted to like get away from the usual PowerPoint presentations because it gives me like a feeling of formality and as an appendage, and it's crazy how we are so attached with our gadgets in any way we can because that is the thing today. Technology is so handy, it's so pervasive that it's taking us away from IPR or interpersonal relationships. The whole point of the conference, for me, at least in this keynote speech or inaugural speech, is that it tends, I hopefully want to not persuade anyone, but to take a harder look in what is happening today. We are all communicators, and by the way, I'm a journalist by profession and a communicator by advocacy. So we've got a good marriage of communication and journalism, whatever, you use it interchangeably. But when I do I just came from akin to this, something like this. It's also a national conference on research where I presented not a paper but a speech on communicating ASEAN. It's specifically, and I'm supposed to like say, okay, how are we supposed to understand ASEAN in the context of every global citizen of the member state of ASEAN understanding how it's supposed to be, looking into their lives and probably thinking about how is it to be an ASEAN member. That's another story. That's the paper I presented in the pre-summit in the Philippines where we held chairmanship. And in the closing event, I was like thinking to myself, whatever happens to ASEAN after the one ASEAN integration and talking about summits, pre-summits, and other meetings that have something to do with the much ballyhooed meetings of leaders, there's something else. Does the ordinary citizen in the ASEAN member state fully understand what it is to become an ASEAN citizen? Again, that's another story. But going back, I told you the platform, and that gives us a thought how communication has really evolved over time. In my own experience, talking to millennials back home, takes us away from the meat and substance of what we're supposed to be doing. Communicators communicating in that kind of special way that we fully understand, or we're fully understood, and making them, everybody making. I'm speaking on behalf, and the Go Philippines, speaking on behalf of other advocacy groups and probably all the other international organizations doing the same advocacy in trying to meet or even face the challenges of today, insofar as the challenges at hand with all the technologies bugging us, and also that point of taking to the stage and even meeting halfway to really talk about all these challenges, and at the end of the day and the final analysis, making sure that we're on the same page, and that when we go back, probably for some of your journalists and media educators, when you go back to your newsrooms, and even kind of share and in all those advocacies, in your meetings and in your lectures with your students, we go back to the basic essentials of what we're supposed to do as communicators. Everyone can be a content provider nowadays. Everybody shares on Facebook. When was the last time, you know, it's crazy back home. It's like, but what's the largest country in the world? You were saying it's a Facebook, because if you like sum up all the number of populations in the world, everyone is just virtual. It's just out there. You don't get to see them, and that's exactly what connectivity is all about. People you don't know, people you don't probably talk to in your everyday life, you get a sense of like, I'm seeing that person on Facebook, and probably when I click on the name, and you don't exactly know who the person was, you click on that name, and then there goes, it just pops out, and there's who's that guy? And because it's a long process of interpersonal relationship, but even trying to connect with the person, talking to the person face to face, and that gives you the kind of substance we all need today. Taking it to pervasive, so that when I told you about clicking and sharing, you do not exactly know the legitimacy of that information. Legitimate sources of information have something to do who is sharing that, who is packaging that information, who is sharing that information, who is actually consuming that information. Where everyone else is a content provider, it gives us some thought that everyone who's out there on Facebook, on social media, creates his or her own world. And that every time you put out something out there, whether it's packaged as an information, by the way, any information packaged by a journalist is called news. And I'm going to tell you something about what's a global phenomenon about fake news that's so pervasive in the Philippines and elsewhere in the world. And that we got to be one community in actually curbing that challenge today and making sure the communicators like us and even journalists like us put that kind of advocacy intentionally and even aggressively, so that the public sphere becomes a platform for decisive and substantial discourse. So basically it cuts across what's happening in the Philippines, it cuts across other parts of the world. And that when we, as journalism as a backdrop, and I would always say this in my speeches, that communication and journalism, first, they can be siblings. Number two, they can be coupled. But definitely, government and media are strange bedfellows, being the former as watchdog, and it doesn't stop there. Now, because of the challenges I was talking about initially, because the way it is right now, and even if millennials would notice, that everyone is so restless, everyone's just quick information. And that quick information becomes so problematic because nobody bets anymore. Clickbait stories based on headlines that are so juicy and spectacular and even sometimes palatable to all the senses makes everyone more wanting to share very quickly without even knowing full well what the information is all about. We've got legitimate sources of information at the heart of all these discussions to be able for us to make sense of how we put information out there insofar as our noble cause as communicators and journalists are concerned. And we've got media literacy and media and information literacy. It's so, it's the in thing today. Media and information literacy, you got to hear this everywhere. Probably in the academic circle, it's so very popular when we go out to the streets and even talk to students who are not necessarily learned about media and education. It's just you get a blank stare. And that sometimes you think that they're listening to you. You think twice about, is that student or kid really getting that information from me as it's supposed to be right now? So going back to, I wanted to veer away from the presentations, but there's some material notes I would like to share to you, just a glimpse of how the Philippines is addressing that. and cuts across how your own each country in the world is also addressing their own problem insofar as fake information, misinformation, disinformation, and all of these are concerned. So I actually started getting the lowdown on social media, the real deal on fake news. In as much as I wanted to have a long course on this one, just some key points for us to really be on the same page. Oh yeah, thank you, thank you. That's so kind of you. Would you want to get your bouquets with you? No. Oh, no, okay. Because I want to take mine in the Philippines and say, this is the bouquet from India, my first in India, wow. You know, and a Jesuit school as well. So I went to the nuns run by school when I was in kindergarten and high school, and I went to a Jesuit school when I was in college. Just imagine the religiosity, and it doesn't show all over my face. I'm sorry, fathers. Okay. Oh yeah, oh thank you. Okay, poor stewardship, I was saying about who is going to take charge when you see a fake information out there. On Facebook would share the same misinformation, disinformation. Nobody is like saying, I am gonna take that out. And it all boils down to, I am going to, the responsible taking that out from the sphere because it's misinformation, it's disinformation, it's just fake news. When I do my seminars and conferences in the Philippines, when I get invited, I would make this clear. It's an oxymoron to say that there's fake news, because in journalism parlance, and you all know these guys as educators, fake news has no place in journalism because by itself, when you talk about news, it's packaged in a way that is a journalistic product. Basically, for sake of debate and popularity, because it's a coinage, it's called fake news, but it's nothing but fake information, disinformation, and misinformation. Imagine it will be using all these terms. Misinformation is quite a mouthful, so people will just remember you by fake news. But basically, technically, it's misinformation and disinformation, and that has to be cleared. And according to Luciano Floridi, fake news authenticity and why we need a new media ethics, because we basically know journalism ethics. Any company, for that matter, has guidelines and policies how people conduct themselves, and that we are supposed to be conducting ourselves properly in public in the way we do our functions and duties. But internet media, digital media, and all these platforms across the world, who knows, 5 years from now, 5 minutes from now, a new form of platform would crop up, and we don't know exactly how to respond to it. Imagine at the onset of internet media and digital media and all, and that we are so adept with technology and that we exactly know how we tinker with our gadgets. But at the end of the day, it gives us a thought that whatever we do with our gadgets and that all these technologies in hand should give us the kind of responsibility to be able to get across that message that anything you do as part of our work, and even as an ordinary citizen, when you are in your family, you always go back to family values. You would always remember that in anything that you do, honesty and dishonesty and lies have no place in a logical and sensible and sensitive discourse. So how do you put it across a sphere that has been convoluted by a lot of probably man-made confusion, not exactly technologically dished out confusion, but what makes all these convolutions and even public not trying to understand what it's supposed to be is because people who should know better are supposed to be that kind of responsible and responsive users of gadgets, of even information packagers and content providers. News aggregators, bloggers, you know, if I talk and talk and talk, you just don't mind the PowerPoint. It's me just like talking, then you would probably imagine from the first slide to the last slide. That's all there is to it about my presentation in my inaugural address and keynote speech. So aggregators, bloggers, pundits, provocateurs, commentators and citizens, journalists are competing with traditional journalists for public. That is the problem, because we know exactly what traditional or legacy media are. and that for the longest time, they have served good purposes of people getting that legitimate information that otherwise cannot be had on other platforms. But it's a different landscape right now, because the landscape is so convoluted and it's so confusing that everyone gets a share, a fair deal of information out there without even knowing who the person has packaged it or who the person behind the information. Lines are blurring so as to say that the legitimate sources of not only journalism, and you've got propaganda, entertainment itself, all of these things are in one package that you don't exactly know what it is now. And for, let's say, for example, an ordinary citizen or any man in the street who's just so adept with everybody else about technology and social media, any gadget for that matter, the phone as an appendage, as that part of like a mechanism that when somebody takes it away from you, that person's gonna probably kill you. Don't take the privacy away from me. Don't take the treasure away from me because I spend like how many dollars for my gadget, and my goodness, just don't tell me what to do with my phone. You see that kind of self-entitlement, guys. And when people out there tell exactly the person what to do, it just gets so, wow, don't get mad at me. I'm just trying to tell you how responsible you can be at this day and age. And that people out there who don't know any better because you know that you've been schooled probably or get a lot of training or even just trying to understand at the back of your mind that it's simply wrong to share misinformation, that legitimate sources of information are just out there for people, for the public to have, because you know exactly how information is processed. In journalism, it's vetted, there's research, it takes a lot of the basic tenets of journalism. In communication as well, has something to do with any communication that doesn't do good to anybody is not good communication. Any process in communication that does not get the message across is not a good communicative or communication process. Poster frame amid digital revolution. I would not exactly say that let's attribute this all to the digital revolution, but I think for the most part of it, we've been talking about how the process has evolved over time, so that digital information has been packaged in such a way used by a lot of people to advance their causes and even propaganda. And I'm not talking about basically governments and politics, but anybody out there who has vested interests, who has an agenda, who has a cause can make use of the social media platform or the internet media to get the message across. However, it's going to have a consequence or consequences on the public or on the person consuming the information. What is news? A report of recent events. It doesn't end. And there, as journalists, we know for a fact, as communicators, we know for a fact that communication and journalism as a couple is not just chronicling of events and sharing information so that the public can make sense of those, but basically you should be talking about how relevant it is today to be talking about who the people are, who are behind those information. If we get information from somebody we don't know, we kind of speculate. Do we actually like suspect or be skeptic? And as journalists, that kind of training we have to be skeptic, but not cynical, to be suspicious, but not cynical, provides us that handle so that we scrutinize every information that we're supposed to package and get it out there so that the people, oh, what did I press? It just, somebody help me? As well. And then we always say this, to be able to exactly know the difference between fake news and not fake news and the real ones is to be able to understand each other. Like money itself or the currency itself. So people just exactly, I'm just going to use it to buy something, and then I get that something worth my money. But at the end of the rope, in a lot of instances, practically, wow, this is like a fake currency, and it's rampant, and it's like, whoa, what do I do? So we know exactly how to differentiate both. I just, lots of other examples. So just make use of money because money is so easy to. Well, yeah, yes. We do a lot of fake money as well. News value, the proximity, human interest, impact, prominence, and why am I saying this? Against a backdrop of fake news, my question is, and you should give us a thought, do all these values, are these present in a fake information or a misinformation, disinformation? If you scrutinize every falsehood, every fake information out there, does it give you prominence, impact, timeless, proximity, human interest, and probably all the other values not there? News quality, subjective, truthful, more importantly, accurate. Accurate was the basic tenet. It's one, accuracy. Number two, accuracy. Number three, it's all accuracy. Of course, you basically know that Bill Kovacs and Tom Rosenthal, the elements of journalism, it's become a Bible for all journalists, but basically it's timeless. I got like, make that book handy, although by size is not handy, but at the back of your mind, you keep on like talking, oh, can we just go back to that book and all the other local books as well, churned out by experts in your university, does not necessarily mean we have to veer away from that, you know, that book. But there are lots of books being created and drafted and circulated in bookstores, in universities. And that's why you have the power of the pen, because you have the loyalty of the ones that are not there. Oh my God, what function do you have when you don't have readers, when you don't have listeners, when you don't have people watching you on TV? Ethics, that's very important. Do people sharing fake information, fake news, have that ethics that we know of? The kind of ethics that we know in our family, the kind of ethics that we use when we conduct ourselves in public, when we engage people, when we address people, when we talk to any ordinary citizen. Ethics. Oops. Okay. Oh. What's happening? It doesn't show to the next slide. Okay. Anyway, you see, my own slides don't want me to use them as well, so might as well, like, I can probably memorize the last stretch of the presentation, but basically, I'm just giving you a backdrop of how any basic information and any profound information for the band that is out there has that kind of legitimacy because it comes from a legitimate source, otherwise not present in a fake information. And then, there goes, thanks, Father. While journalism is more providing an outlet for discussion or adding one's voice to the conversation, it's really very important, okay, it's really very important not only to engage people, but to try to help them make sense of any information. And it's a cliche when we say that any information, for that matter, empowers people because it can really empower people. And when I do my stories, like for example, I do a lot of stories at PWDs, people with disabilities and even covering IPs or indigenous peoples. I veer away from traditional sources, meaning just talking to the first layer, talking to probably official sources, not just trying to, like, I have a cause to get across to you, and that this is my agenda. And you're just talking to yourself and then probably a limited group that understands you and that probably shares the same cause, but otherwise not shared as a welfare insofar as this information is concerned. What has become the news and social media? Sharing eyewitness accounts, citizen journalism, and online shopping started with probably, if you're familiar with BuzzFeed, it's just out there, and you know, it's disheartening that we know exactly our work. Fake news or fake information, disinformation has become a norm, and that does not suit well with communication. And the noble cause of what we do as communicators and journalists and media educators, we should be at the fore so that we can tell the public that this is information, and any news out there should have legitimate sources. Oh, it's not working, okay. Main source of the news today, we do global, we know exactly what's happening in the States. Okay, 60% or probably now more of Americans get their news from social media, where fake news and hoaxes proliferate. I'm not saying that I would not want to tell, but probably he was already dressed up the night before. And what I'm saying is that it becomes so natural that everyone just clicks on the gadget. And there's a running joke among us when we do graces before meal, which is a family tradition. The first comes to mind, and even eating, before eating, is just, let's do this on and then, okay. Okay, what is fake news? Stories that are not true, exactly what is supposed to be, mainly through internet-based media. But one time, at this I was saying, can legitimate traditional media, newspapers, radio, television, can also, is there a possibility for them to churn out news that's just limited to internet-based media? It can happen. Basically why? To mislead others or even confuse people. I've been telling my young audiences, you just don't know this, I told them, you just don't know this, but once you share an information that is no good, you're destroying his life, somebody else's life. Somebody's community is out there suffering from fake news. And nobody's watching you, and because you just went to just clickbait and so amused and even beguiled by the kind of headline, without even clicking, without even going inside that information. And once you do that, you will exactly know, and you could surmise to tell the difference between a fake one and a good one. Okay, just a few examples from the Philippines. So there was this tsunami news, tsunami information south of the Philippines, and everyone went crazy. So yeah, in those communities in the south of the Philippines, they were all agog that a tsunami would actually happen. But it turned out it was fake news, and that everyone's like, it took somebody or a responsible citizen, a netizen on Facebook and social media to say, it's hoax, it's not true. So calm yourselves down, it's not going to happen. Much like in the recent, now, and CNN Philippines was like a victim of it, because remember Yolanda, Haiyan in the Philippines were really hard hit. Southern Philippines was hard hit. It came out in CNN, and like where the event was actually an event by itself. It's authentic. What makes it impossible? What makes it fake? Because people were using the old event to say that something like that is going to happen soon, and it did not happen. And people just went crazy. And you see how it can actually wreak havoc, physically, emotionally, and mentally. So this tsunami did not happen. False alarms are absolutely unnecessary times like this. The scenario itself is already scary and people should not be. While any news can be alarming, you can be an alarmist, especially when you're covering disasters and even earthquakes, tsunamis, etc. The point of it all is that veering away from that kind of attitude, or not veering away from the kind of attitude makes us no different from people who manufacture false information. Yeah, fake news is a real problem. It's here, and when they ask me, is it going away? Like, can you actually determine or can you predict what all these responsible advocacies against fake news are running wild, not only in the Philippines, but all across probably Asia, and that Japan, for example, is the first country in Asia that created a multi-sectoral group or coalition against fake actions from a lot of groups, because like my company, the Philippine Press Institute, did not make an institutional stand or position. We said that how can let's say for example, a democracy, a democratic country like the Philippines and even with high literacy rate want to have a law that stops fake news. It's supposed to be no-brainer, but how stupid can we get that even a law should be passed and be proposed so that we can curb news? So it's still there. It's pending, and I hope it doesn't get, because just a little background about it. The bill says anything perceived to be fake or perceived to be a disinformation and misinformation, and who should really define fake news. And if we leave the responsibility to those who created that law, that it can have a chilling effect on everyone, not only the journalists, but a lot of people who are active, who are netizens, who are active on social media, and who make social media as significant use in their own lives, no matter how strange sometimes it becomes. Oh yeah, I said that already. Oh, fake news, I said a while, manipulation, public opinion. Sometimes we don't know. Even the ordinary citizen doesn't exactly know that they're being manipulated already, and that it just gets into the nerve. And people who know exactly what it is makes you think that that person who knows any better should have that responsibility. And for me, it's imperative to call out somebody, especially sometimes, you know, the feeling of being polite makes you not call out somebody on social media. Because for one thing, you might run into conflict with the person, so you end the friendship, right? So what I do, when practically, like, when they ask me, how do you do it? Even with my friends who wittingly or unwittingly share misinformation, disinformation, I would always tell them, just one tip. Don't call out the person publicly, but go through the back door, meaning you can privately message the person and tell the person, please take that out because it's misinformation. And for nobility purpose, I would always say, you know, you're only as good as your last information. Anything you share on Facebook, and probably it's like out of the box, but really, it speaks about your character. When you consistently share or even post anything that is of ill will, anything that is not responsibly thought out, does it make you a better person? That kind of person is so discerning, probably so discerning, would actually think twice and say, wow, I know you, I have high regard for you, but where are you now? That information you share that's fake as you would know it makes me think twice about you, but it doesn't actually define the character of the person. What I'm saying is that anything that the person does, especially if you're a professional, makes one thing that you should be as responsible as the other person who is learned. Two kinds of fake news, very quickly. The false stories deliberately posted online, even the person writing them knows they're fabricated. So that person, and the key word there is that that person exactly knows it's fake, but he still shared the information. Number two, stories that maybe have some truth to them, but they're not completely accurate. For example, making use of a photo. I made an example of, it happened in the past, but it's packaged in the, it is packaged today, so to have a semblance of what is going to happen. Gives you a sense of foreboding, but again, you have two concepts out there on the second one. Like for example, a photo can be fake, but the context or the text itself is okay. Or the text is okay, but the photo is not for real. Oh, everybody's favorite. Okay, just one of the few examples I would usually share. There was into his office, like a few months into his office, there's this fake news. We all know this is fake news. But when it first came out, everybody shared it, especially those who are actually like enamored by the president. And because really, somebody from the South came first. I mean, that first Southerner who actually became president. So this came out that UNESCO, if there was such a thing, as United Nations Economic and Social Council applauded or gave recognition to the president as an achiever. So I would always tell my audiences, take a look at all the elements, like who shared it, Dugong Maharlika or Noble Blood. Did you ever click it and then read it? And what makes this shareable? Is it propaganda? It makes you think a lot of things. One of the few examples I would share. And then also the vice president, you know, supposed to be a tandem. But the vice president is also popular. So this thing about supposedly an article made by We Are Collective, the group is called We Are Collective. And that group, whoever they are, because they're anonymous, you see anonymity of any information makes you think that it is not a legitimate information because they do not introduce themselves. They do not come out openly and say, we are this and this and that. So this photo came out in an article, as I said, ran by We Are Collective. It was taken down a few times and it just came up. Deception, they took the photo from an article from Esquire. No attribution whatsoever, and then they made an owner. The sad thing is that it was so out of context, making use of that photo to really lambast the vice president. And it gives you a thought, who are behind this fake information? First, there's an ethics involved there. You did not ask the permission of Esquire to make use of the photo. You just ran wild. You just, for the sake of lambasting the vice president or sharing an information that's probably working for a lot of the supporters and non-supporters. Yes. And then, we're not going to the article. I'd like to, for example, take note of the second form of fake news. Peter Chulavino was part of the cabinet member of the president. But, you know, if you read the text, it makes you think, wow, this is so ennobling and so heartwarming because it's really happening. But the photo is from Brazil. Look at that. At first instance, you would think this is a legitimate information. And then that whole thing about the vice president. In another example, another realm, remember that Pizzagate, where man ran wild, took gunshots and taking fire at some of those people at the pizza parlor, which was fakely labeled as a prostitution ring run by Clinton. Of course, it was fake news. You see how it really can be dangerous to people, communities, businesses, and a lot of things. And just how all the theories, I just try to make us, you know, how educators sometimes and theories and all this run wild with all these ideas about, let's do a diagram and illustration. It's a web of complications, but basically what it's telling everyone is that it started from social media, and there's probably a group or people who had this really crazy imagination, and then a web of complications out there. Okay, whose responsibility is it to stop the spread of fake news? Now we go down to the brass tacks. So after all the concepts, etc., and the experiential sharing of thoughts, and even how we, in our daily lives, come across disinformation and misinformation, it is our responsibility as journalists, producers of information, content providers, watchdog, and the academe. And of course, I would always say this, the state has the responsibility to keep democracy intact by ensuring that misinformation, disinformation do not come out or come from the government. Okay. Is there a virus somewhere? And Am I bugged already? Okay. Anyway, no worries, Father. I'm on to my, my parting words. So, makes you think that nowadays, while we're so probably consumed by technology and as educators, making use of technology to reinforce learning, and for ordinary citizens to be using their gadgets and going through the process of like clicking and sharing, and that information has just become so like food, like food. Anybody consumes it, anybody throws it away, and anybody just get it for somebody else's meal. But at the end of the day, as I said, it makes us think that how responsible should we, as netizens, as educators and journalists, to be telling the public, please support information, not even good information, but information and a product of communication and a product of a journalistic process, to make use of them, consume them, and then share them so that it can empower people. People can make decisive actions. People can make decisions at the end of the day because they're able to get that kind of information that is of good use, that makes them think that lies and deception have no place in a logical, in a substantial discourse. On that note, I'd like to thank everyone for listening to me, and I hope I don't get to see you probably in the future, and you got some keynotes of myself, my voice lingers, this kind of going voice lingers to you and say, wow, I kind of like remember that guy. Because as I said, I do not exactly know why they get me, because there are lots of veteran and seasoned journalists and communicators in the Philippines, but probably the organizers just wanted to have somebody crazy, irreverent, and just the kind of guy who exactly knows and experiences back home how is it to have or experience or read fake information that hurts me a lot, that hurts somebody else's, and even your family. Let's keep our family intact and get the family values intact so that we can fight fake news, disinformation, and that's supposedly what social media is all about. Connectivity, but at the same time, responsibly using it, that when we are connected at hand, we make the connections better, we make the communication process better, and makes us a better person. Thanks everyone, thank you, and thanks for inviting me.
Thank you, Mr. Ariel, for your valuable keynote address and for dwelling on the reality and challenges of fake news, especially to us as communicators, and for reminding us of our obligation to truth and our loyalty to citizens. Thank you.
We now have the book release titled Media and Democracy. This book is a selected and edited collection of 16 research papers and case studies that were presented in the Second International Media Conference held at Xavier University, BHUBANESWAR on the 25th and 26th, 2016.
The articles in this book discuss how the new media and their convergence have revolutionized and redefined the understanding and practice of democracy in the modern world.
Dr. Father George Sebastian S.J., the editor of the book, is a member of the Strategic Academic Advisory Board of Xavier School of Communications, member of Review Committee of the conference, and a visiting faculty at Xavier School of Communications, Xavier University, BHUBANESWAR.
Dr. George specializes in visual communication and film studies. He is also the founder director of Tanmaya Media Education and Research Center at Kottayam. I now request Father Paul, Father George, Dr. Sharon, Mr. Krishna Prasad, and Mr. Ariel to please come up on the stage for the book release.
We now request Father Ludraj also to join us in the book reading.
We also request our registrar to please, Father, please.
So the book is being released by Dr. Sharon and being presented to Father Paul, our Vice Chancellor. We once again like to extend our heartfelt gratitude to our sponsors, Jindal Stainless Limited, Tata Steel, Coca-Cola, Volvo India, South Indian Bank, and our media partner, the New Indian Express. We are also thankful to DD News and OTV for covering the event.
Now we have a short tea break of 30 minutes. The tea and snacks are arranged outside in the corridor, and we also request please kindly dispose the used water bottles in the designated bins and be back in the venue by 11:55 a.m. Thank you.